Mysterious. Hey everybody, welcome back to Cryptid Mysterious. While I have a little bit of time here and a couple of new stories, I figured I'd try and squeeze another video out. Our first one, I got two stories for today's video. Our first one comes to us from Ronnie. Before we jump in, if you wouldn't mind, smack that subscribe button and let me know where you're watching from down in the comments. I always appreciate everybody putting down there where they're watching from. It's always interesting. Ronnie is a resident of Northern Ohio, and here's his story. It was 2 years after our marriage in 1986 that we'd purchased an older home on a 2.5-acre lot in the northeast part of Ohio. I'm not going to tell you the exact location because we sold the home after what I'm about to say to you happened. The house was a 2-story home built in the 1930s, which had a large, dilapidated outbuilding in the back of the property. My wife, being the artist in the family, had already, upon first seeing it, decided that she was going to paint it or draw it, or both, thinking it had great appeal. To me, it just looked like a haunted house, and I couldn't care less. One day when I came home, my wife had walked out to the barn during the day, wanting to swing one of the broken doors into a better position for her drawing. She told me that when she approached the barn, that it reeked of like human feces or something really, really bad, and she didn't go inside to see what it was. I told her that I'd take a look, which I did on the following weekend. We'd never seen the barn up close prior to this time period. It was only when my wife had decided to draw that we had ventured out to where it was in the lot. Some of the boards in the back wall were missing or broken, as well as part of the roof was rotten, which allowed a fair amount of light into the structure. As I entered, the barn did, in fact, stink of manure. And yet, I could see no piles of crap or anything dead lying on the floor. There was, however, a timber staircase leading up to an overhanging, a loft, if you will, that actually looked fairly sturdy, so I made my way up. Now looking at this loft, which was about 20 by 40 feet, it was heaped with sticks and branches and grass in the shape of what I can only describe as being a giant nest on an enormous scale. And there were actually several, if not more, piles of crap in various states of decay scattered around in here. And it absolutely reeked. The intended area, if you can imagine a bird's nest, only giant-sized, was about 10 feet or more across and well compressed, looking like something was living there to my eyes. There were also some old bones lying here and there, but from what? I did not know. So I climbed down, having told my wife what I'd found. All that she said was, "That's weird." Well, as the weeks and months went by, my wife had drawn the barn from many different perspectives, and to me she seemed to be a little obsessed with the damn thing, to the point where she's now had about 8 drawings. On what was yet another day after returning home from work, my wife said to me, "I saw something peeking out from behind the barn door today." And I said to her, "What do you mean you saw something peeking out from behind the door?" And she said, "There was a large, dark figure leaning out from behind the door. And when I fixed my eyes on it, the thing ducked back inside. I said to her, "What did it look like?" To which she said that whatever it was had to have been as tall as the door, which was about 8 feet, and it was hairy. Well, I thought she'd lost her rocker for sure. And that very day, about a half an hour before sunset, I went out to take a look, with a pitchfork in hand. As I approached the door, I was intentionally making some noise in case anything was in there. And when I stuck my head inside, I heard a growl that was deep and foreboding coming from the loft. And when I looked up, staring down at me, were 2 large red glowing eyes, set maybe a foot apart. It gives me chills to this very day just talking about it. Well, I never ran so fast in my life to get away from that place, and having reached the house, I told my wife there was a bear out there. But believe me, this was no bear. It was a monster of epic proportions. I told Marianne that it would be best to stay away from that building, and that it would be best to take it down to keep the bears from staying in there. The following week, I had a dozer operator knock the entire building down, burying the debris out in the field, and that was the end of it. Today, I firmly believe that what I had seen was a Bigfoot, based on what I have since heard of and about them. But back then, if you ask me, I would have said it was the devil himself. That's how evil and frightening this encounter was. These eyes were glowing like red flashlights, and the growl which it made pierced my very soul. It was absolutely terrifying, and I didn't tell my wife the truth until many years had passed. We sold the property just a few months later, and that was it. Yeah, I can imagine that would be terrifying. Holy smokes. Our next story comes to us from Irving. He is a resident of Colorado. His story begins. At that point in my life, I was 22 years young and had a bundle of energy and enthusiasm. My favorite pastime was hiking through the mountains and forests, most of the time going it alone. I had taken 2 weeks off, with my plan being to hike the Continental Divide across the Flat Top Mountain, Taylor Peak, McHenry Peak, and Mount Alice. Each mountain ranged between 12,300 feet and 13,300 feet. But I wouldn't be climbing each one to their summits. It was on my 3rd day, as I had passed Andrews Glacier, and as I was now heading for Taylor Peak, that I had sat down to rest for a spell, removing my pack and resting against a warm rock. The sun was bright, and before I knew it, having no alarm clock and no control over when I would wake up. It was 3 hours later when my eyes opened, and it was getting late. I decided to head for the timber near the base of Taylor and rest for the night, making camp. Having slept for 3 hours, with day now turning to night, I was wide awake and sitting by the fire when a rock came flying into the firelight. Understand me, please. There was no place for this rock to come from other than having been thrown. And I was now on edge. I had a pistol, and it was now in my hand. And believe you me, I was more than willing to use it if need be. There's a lot of things out here that could kill a man, but none that I was aware of that threw rocks. I was now on my feet, basically spinning in circles in response to the reality of imagined sounds that I was hearing. And then suddenly I shouted, "Who the hell are you? Why are you toying with me?" Then everything went silent. I could feel my heart starting to race, and I felt that my emotions were starting to get the best of me, when suddenly a second rock, which this time I saw it in the air, came from behind me, crossing over the fire and landing on the ground. and I spun around. I couldn't see more than 40 feet or so outside the firelight, and my body was beginning to tremble. First, it was slow, and then it became more violent. I was trapped, and I knew it. It was moments later, as once again I turned rather abruptly, hoping by moving quickly to catch sight of whoever or whatever was throwing the rocks, that my eyes met the silhouette of the culprit. Just outside of the visible fire's light was an enormous, dark, shadowy shape, which I immediately recognized as being that of a Sasquatch. I pulled the trigger 2 times, firing high and left of the beast intentionally, and I could see it turn away and begin to do what sounded to me like running. In the moment, I thought to myself, "Catch me if you can, sucker." And I began to run into the night, having grabbed my pack. I don't know how or where the energy came from, or how I didn't break my neck in the process. I ran like I had never run in my life, staying on low ground and off the mountains, heading in the direction of Dream Lake and what would eventually be the ranger station. As the sun was rising, I was still running, and how many miles I had kept the pace was unknown. I had to have achieved well over a marathon's distance and wasn't about to quit, when suddenly I stopped. I drank half a bottle of Gatorade and ate a granola bar and began to walk, not wanting my legs to cramp, causing me to stop. By the time the lake came into sight, I briefly pulled out my map and realized I must have been running all over the place, thinking I was heading in a straight line. I had to have run 5 times the distance on the map between where I began and where I now was. I stopped at the station to sit and rest. As I told the ranger what had happened during the night, and he said that it wasn't the first time he had heard such things. Apparently, although he wasn't forthcoming with a great deal of information, I got the impression that I wasn't alone in having this encounter. That was the last time I went hiking in an overnight type of situation, being over 20 years ago. The size of this creature's silhouette was massive, and had it wanted to get me, I'm sure it easily could have. Completely had its way in doing so. God was with me that night, and I'm here to proclaim it. Wow. Well, thanks guys for sticking around. I thoroughly enjoyed reading those encounters. If you've had a Bigfoot encounter, I absolutely love hearing them. Feel free to drop your encounter to my email at cryptidmysterious@gmail.com. I appreciate y'all. Smack that subscribe and like and drop me a comment, and I'll see y'all in the next one.